I was sitting on the cold marble floor of our front porch, tears staining the sleeves of my hoodie, when my dad opened the door and looked down at me like I was a stranger. He didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't even ask why I was crying. He just sighed and said, "You brought this on yourself, Emily. Don't expect sympathy when you go chasing unrealistic dreams." I had just lost the one thing I thought would change everything. My final audition for the conservatory was rejected. And it wasn't just a no. It was a brutal silence. No call. No email. Just nothing. I was 19, alone in the one place that was supposed to be my safe zone, my home. And the people who should have stood behind me? They turned away like I embarrassed them. That night, I wrote one line in my journal I still remember. Rejection is loud when silence comes from the people you love. Have you ever been turned away by your own family for simply trying to follow your dream? Comment still standing if you've ever felt invisible in your own home. I was the artsy one in a family of engineers. My dad, Thomas Miller, was a structural engineer, logical, calculated, and proud of it. My mom, Susan, worked in finance. My older brother, Ethan, MIT graduate, already working at Tesla by the time I finished high school. And then there was me, Emily Miller, the black sheep, the dreamer, the girl who cried during movie soundtracks and painted on the walls of her bedroom because the canvas felt too small. When I was 11, I saw a Broadway play for the first time, Wicked. I remember gripping the edge of my seat, tears in my eyes when Elphaba sang, defying gravity. I knew right then I needed to perform. I wanted that stage. I didn't want applause. I wanted to move people. At 13, I started writing songs. At 15, I joined the drama club. At 17, I was winning local talent shows, quiet ones, sure, but I saw it as proof I had something. But every time I came home with a certificate, my dad would say things like, "That's great, honey, but don't let this distract you from real career paths. Music's a nice hobby. You'll thank us one day for keeping you grounded." My mom wasn't unkind, just distant. She supported me in the way people clap politely at a child's drawing. Kind, but dismissive. Ethan once told me, jokingly, "Your best shot is probably becoming a TikTok singer. Otherwise, good luck paying rent with a guitar." I laughed with him, but that night I cried. Not because I didn't believe in myself, but because it was exhausting being the only one who did. Still, I applied to the New York Academy of Performing Arts with every ounce of courage I had. I didn't tell anyone at home right away. I practiced in the garage. I filmed my audition tape at 2 a.m. so no one would hear. It was my little rebellion. It was my spark. And for a while, it was enough to keep me warm. The distance between me and my family didn't happen overnight. It was a slow drift, one shrug at a time. When I finally told them about my application to the New York Academy, I expected at least some excitement. Maybe even surprise. What I got instead was a family meeting around the dinner table like I had dropped a bomb. Dad folded his hands in front of him, expression unreadable. "You applied to where, Emily? Without telling us?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I made it to the final round. If I get in, it's a full scholarship." Ethan smirked over his water glass. "That's cute. Full scholarship for interpretive crying? Must be nice." I forced a laugh. I always did. But Mom was quiet. Too quiet. "Sweetheart," she finally said, "we just don't want you to build your life on something so unstable." I looked at her, searching for a trace of pride. A flicker of belief. Nothing. "You guys always said I could be anything," I whispered. Dad's reply cut through the silence. "Anything realistic, Emily." It was like being stabbed with a paper cut. Small, subtle, but it stung deep. That week I noticed the little things. How they left me out of college discussions. How they bragged about Ethan's next project on LinkedIn, but never once mentioned my performances. How Mom bought Ethan a new laptop for work and told me, "You already have your guitar." When the letter from NYPA finally arrived, I stood on the front porch holding the envelope like it was glowing. My hands shook. I ripped it open. I was in. Full scholarship. Fall semester. I screamed. I cried. And when I ran inside to tell them, the response was underwhelming. Dad barely looked up from his spreadsheet. Mom smiled softly but said, "Just don't get your hopes up too high. New York's tough. Ethan, congrats. Now you get to be poor in a cooler zip code." The worst part? They weren't cruel. They were just dismissive, quietly erasing my joy. Like it didn't matter. They didn't stop me, but they didn't support me either. And that silent rejection? It was worse than a slap. Still, I packed my bags. With their half-hearted good lucks ringing in my ears, I boarded that plane to New York alone. But in my heart, I believed. Maybe once they saw me succeed, they'd finally be proud of me. The first few months in New York were the hardest and most magical of my life. I lived in a fifth-floor walk-up with creaky floors, a flickering kitchen light, and neighbors who played jazz at 2 a.m. But I loved it. I was finally breathing air that felt like mine. Classes were intense. There were nights I cried myself to sleep because I felt so behind, so unpolished compared to kids who had vocal coaches since age 6. But I kept going. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a bookstore, another waiting tables, to afford groceries. My phone calls home grew fewer and fewer, not because I didn't miss them, but because every call felt like I had to defend my joy. Then came the day that shattered me. It was November, cold and rainy. I had just gotten my first lead role in a student showcase, an original musical that was being scouted by real Broadway reps. It felt like everything I'd worked for was finally opening up. I texted my family group chat. Big news. Got the lead role. Opening night in 3 weeks. I'll send tickets.
Scene.
No reply. I followed up with, "Would mean the world if you guys could come. Especially you, Mom." No response. A few days later, I got a call not from my parents, but from Aunt Linda. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. "Honey, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I saw your Instagram post about the showcase. I'm sorry your parents aren't coming. They're throwing Ethan's promotion party that same weekend." I stared at the phone like it had turned to ice in my hand. "Wait, what? A party?" She hesitated. "I assumed you knew. They've invited everyone. Family, neighbors, even Ethan's college buddies." I couldn't breathe. I hung up. No text from Mom. "No, sorry, we can't make it." Just silence. And then the worst part, I opened Facebook. There it was, a photo of a huge banner in our backyard. "Congratulations, Ethan, Tesla's youngest team led." A catered tent, string lights, a cake shaped like a circuit board. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. The same weekend, the same people I had begged to come watch the biggest moment of my life had been celebrating someone else's. Not one message, not one call, not one person asked if I was okay. Opening night came. I stood backstage in my costume, peeking through the curtain. Other kids had flowers, parents waving from the front row, siblings filming every second. My side of the audience? Empty. I walked on stage, heart hammering. And when I sang that first note, something inside me cracked. Not from fear, but from a deeper grief. The kind you can't explain. It wasn't just about the role. It was about finally realizing they were never going to be proud of me. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be Ethan. Never be enough. I finished the performance. I got a standing ovation. I walked off stage and sobbed in the dressing room alone. Later that night, my director, Ms. Ramirez, found me wiping mascara off my cheeks. She sat beside me and said, "Emily, you have something they may never understand. But that doesn't make it any less real. You don't need their validation to shine." That sentence became a mantra, because in that moment, something shifted. I wasn't crying because they didn't see me. I was crying because I finally did. 3 days after the showcase, I got a message from my mom. Just 3 words. "How'd it go?" I stared at it. No punctuation. No apology. Not even a fake, supportive emoji. I left it on read. But the rage simmered.
Boiled.
Became something I couldn't ignore anymore. A week later, I booked a bus ticket home for Thanksgiving. Not because I missed them, but because I needed answers. Closure. Or maybe just to reclaim my voice. I showed up unannounced, suitcase in hand. The familiar scent of cinnamon candles and carpet cleaner hit me as I stepped into the house I used to dream in. Ethan was on the couch, watching football. He gave me a half smirk. Didn't think Broadway gave holiday breaks. I ignored him. Mom emerged from the kitchen, apron on. She blinked in surprise. Emily, you didn't say you were coming. Figured that's the only way I'd be seen. Her face froze. Dad walked in behind her, frown already forming. What's this attitude about? Oh, I don't know, I snapped. Maybe the fact that I was performing a lead role in front of 200 people while you were cutting cake under twinkle lights for Ethan. The room went silent. Ethan chuckled. You seriously still on that? You're acting like you were nominated for a Grammy. I turned to him, fury finally spilling from years of buried wounds. You don't get to minimize me anymore. I worked for that. Every second. Every tear. Every night, I skipped dinner to rehearse, while you had your life handed to you with a ribbon. I pulled a folded program from my bag and placed it on the table. Here. Since none of you came, maybe you can at least pretend to care now. Mom reached for it, but I stepped back. Don't bother. I didn't come for applause. I came to say something I should have said a long time ago. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. I'm done begging for your pride. I'm done shrinking myself to fit your version of success. I'm an artist. I'm a performer. And even if the whole world walks out, I'll still be standing on that stage. They didn't speak, just stood there, absorbing the weight of words they never expected from me. Then I took out the only thing I wanted to leave behind, a copy of my acceptance letter. I'd kept it in my wallet all year. This changed my life. You didn't celebrate it, but I will, every day. I placed it next to the family photo on the mantel, where I finally belonged in my own way. And I walked out, not in tears, not in shame, but in power. The bus ride back to New York was quiet, not because I was sad, but because silence finally felt clean, like detox. I stared out the window, watching pine trees blur into winter fog, and I knew something had changed forever, not just between me and my family, but inside me. When I got back to my apartment, I found a small envelope slipped under the door. It was from Ms. Ramirez, my director. Inside was a simple note. Your power is your truth. Never let anyone mute it. Taped to the back was a newspaper clipping. Our student showcase had been featured in a local art section. There was a photo of me mid-performance, arms outstretched, eyes alight. I stared at it for a long time. And then I cried. Not because I was broken, but because for the first time in months, someone saw me. Over the next few weeks, reality set in. I didn't hear from my parents. Not for Christmas. Not for New Year's. Not even when my next performance got picked up by an off-Broadway producer. At first it stung. Then it simply stopped mattering. But the silence did make me reflect. I thought back to all the times as a kid when I brought home crayon drawings and they'd say, "That's nice, honey, but Ethan's science fair is tomorrow." Or the piano recital, where I played Beethoven from memory, and Mom whispered to Dad, "She's not bad, but Ethan's team just won the robotics competition." I used to think I was just unlucky. Now I realized I was invisible in a family that only had room for one star. And it wasn't me. That realization was painful, like mourning a version of your childhood you wished had existed. A version of your parents that clapped in the front row, that saved your drawings on the fridge, that told you, "We believe in you." But clarity, even when bitter, is a kind of freedom. I stopped chasing closure. I stopped waiting for them to catch up. Instead, I poured my pain into something real. My art, my voice, my story. And slowly, something beautiful happened. People who weren't blood started showing up. Spring came early that year in New York. The city was still its chaotic self, sirens, steam rising from subway grates, a constant hum of movement. But something inside me had slowed down, like my soul had exhaled. I started therapy. It was scary at first, unpacking years of feeling less than, peeling back layers of guilt I didn't know I was carrying. But it was also the first space where everything I felt was valid, where too sensitive wasn't an insult, it was insight. I also joined a creative collective for young playwrights. We met every Thursday in a repurposed loft downtown. Ex-musicians, actors, poets, all of us bleeding stories into the room like therapy through art. There I met Janelle, a costume designer from Atlanta with lavender braids and a laugh like sunrise. She didn't just become my roommate, she became the sister I never had. The kind who left sticky notes on my mirror that read, "Sing like someone's finally listening." Janelle came to every show, every open mic, every callback audition. She clapped loud. She brought flowers. She reminded me that family doesn't have to be genetic, it can be chosen. And then something magical happened. My showcase director, Ms. Ramirez, referred me to a casting agency looking for original talent for a new off-Broadway musical. They wanted real voices, raw stories, unpolished brilliance. I auditioned with a monologue I wrote myself, a piece about a girl who was never chosen, but kept showing up anyway. 2 weeks later, I got the call. "We'd like to offer you a lead." I stood in my tiny kitchen, barefoot, staring at the phone, blinking back tears. Not because of the role, but because I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to rise. That girl they ignored? She had become a woman who built a stage of her own. And this time, my name was on the poster. If you're still watching this, thank you. Truly. Because maybe, like me, you felt invisible in the rooms that should have loved you loudest. Maybe your family never clapped. Maybe they always picked someone else. But hear this. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You do not need permission to shine. I thought recognition had to come from the people who raised me. But sometimes it comes from strangers who see your soul before your surname. If you've ever fought to be seen, to be heard, drop in the comments so I know I'm not alone. And tell me, what's your story of rejection and your path to rising?
Like, share, subscribe.
Not just for me, but for every girl, boy, or dreamer who's ever been underestimated. We're rewriting the ending now. Together.